So you want me to marry you then?
Well, that's a bit sudden, but all right.
Is that what you'd call a proposal?
I love you. Always have.
Robert the Bruce dropped in 2020 as a sort of unofficial sequel to Braveheart, continuing the story in an unexpected direction. While Braveheart ended with William Wallace's death, this follow-up shifts focus to Robert the Bruce, with Angus Macfadyen reprising his role from the 1995 classic. The movie explores Robert's life before his rise to kinghood, focusing on his struggles leading up to the iconic Battle of Bannockburn. If Braveheart was all about Gibson's William Wallace, this one shines the spotlight on Macfadyen's Robert during his toughest days. Much like Mel Gibson's Braveheart, which he also directed, Robert the Bruce was co-written by Angus Macfadyen and Eric Belgo. While it's not a direct sequel to Braveheart, it works as a follow-up by continuing the story of Scotland's fight for independence against England. Both films share this central theme of the war for freedom. This movie, however, takes a more personal angle, serving as a redemption arc for Macfadyen's Robert, addressing his betrayal of William Wallace in Braveheart and his time fighting alongside the English. The final act of Braveheart sees William Wallace's brutal execution in 1305, hanged, disemboweled, and decapitated, as an attempt by England to crush Scotland's rebellion. Ironically, his death became a rallying cry, fueling the revolt that Robert the Bruce would eventually lead to victory at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, securing Scotland's independence. The loosely connected sequel, Robert the Bruce, focuses on the uncertain years between Wallace's death and that decisive battle. Though Macfadyen plays a much older Robert, the film condenses history to explore a specific chapter of his life. It begins in 1306 with Robert at a low point, defeated, crownless, and ready to abandon his fight for freedom. After being wounded by bounty hunters driven by gold, he's taken in by Morag, a widowed peasant farmer. As Robert recovers in hiding, he learns that Morag's late husband had been one of his loyal soldiers. Despite suffering greatly, losing his leg, and ultimately his life, Morag's husband remained devoted to Robert's cause, a commitment that Morag and her family still uphold. Their unwavering loyalty reignites Robert's determination, inspiring him to resume his fight for Scotland's freedom and eventually claim his destiny as king. While Braveheart tells its story on an epic scale, Robert the Bruce feels more like a single chapter. It tries to stretch this part of Robert's life into a full-length film, but ends up feeling more like an epilogue to something grander. There are many missed opportunities in the storytelling, making it feel like a spiritual sequel to Braveheart that never quite hits the mark. The film spends a lot of time focusing on Robert's internal struggle, his healing process, and the impact of war on ordinary people, which could have been interesting. But a lot of the film drags, with over 50 minutes spent on Robert recovering in a cave with a spider before meeting Morag. The film also spends a lot of time on Morag's 11-year-old son Scott, who, frankly, doesn't have the depth to carry such a heavy narrative. Often Robert seems like a background character in his own story, overshadowed by others. Robert the Bruce tries to capture the spirit of Braveheart, but it falls short. Unlike Braveheart, which had a king as its main antagonist, here the villain is a local sheriff named Brandub, hardly the kind of larger-than-life enemy you'd expect in a film like this. There are no epic battles or memorable moments like blue-painted faces. Instead, the film focuses on a small group of mercenaries terrorizing a widow, her children, a wounded king, and a blacksmith's daughter. In the end, the mercenaries kill the blacksmith's daughter, one of the few brave women in the film, but her death lacks impact because she doesn't have enough screen time to make it meaningful. Compared to Braveheart, Robert the Bruce is a quieter, more introspective reflection on war, suffering, and small-time tyrants, but it doesn't have the same emotional weight or excitement. While you'd think a Braveheart sequel would grab more attention, there are plenty of sequels that have flown under the radar, with some fans either forgetting they exist or never knowing about them in the first place. Much like Braveheart 2, some of these sequels are smaller movies that have only the slightest connection to the original, often released directly to video. A notable example is American Psycho 2, which stars Mila Kunis as a new killer. Originally, this movie wasn't connected to American Psycho at all, but they made the connection at the last minute. In a controversial move, Patrick Bateman does appear, though not fully shown. Christian Bale didn't return, and is quickly killed off. The sequel even tried to answer the ambiguous ending of American Psycho, which many fans felt was better left open to interpretation. In the 90s and 2000s, Disney got in on the trend of direct-to-video sequels for their big hits. Movies like Aladdin got the return of Jafar and Aladdin and The King of Thieves. The Lion King got The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, and The Little Mermaid got The Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea. While some sequels were received better than others, none of them could live up to the acclaim of the original films. Then there are the sequels that barely relate to the original and just try to ride the coattails of a recognizable name. Take Sam Mendes' Jarhead, a serious war film about a soldier's mental health struggles during the Gulf War, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. Despite the movie focusing on the fact that many soldiers never even fired their weapons during the war, there were 3 direct-to-video Jarhead sequels, which turned into full-blown action films. There's also a possibility that a Braveheart sequel could address the controversial detail of Jus Primae Noctis, a concept that's been widely rejected by medieval experts but still plays a significant role in the movie. In his book The Medieval Chastity Belt, a myth-making process, medieval historian Albert Classen argues that the idea of Jus Primae Noctis never really actually existed. He traces its origins to Shakespeare's play Henry V, where it was used to symbolize tyrannical rule. Though the idea didn't originate from actual historical practices, it gained traction over time, which is why it appears in Braveheart. The problem is that the film's creators didn't research whether such a law ever existed in Scotland during the 1200s, or anywhere at all. While the idea of Jus Primae Noctis is often associated with feudalism, it's more of a myth inspired by the manipulation of power by lords. In reality, the law never existed despite claims from some newly rich lords in the 17th century who argued they should be entitled to it, only for their claims to be swiftly rejected. Furthermore, while lords might have some control over marriage arrangements or required a fee, there's no historical evidence of a lord taking a bride on her wedding night, as Jus Primae Noctis suggests. Medieval historians like Classen point out that there is no record in medieval chronicles, literature, or legal texts of Jus Primae Noctis. Myths like this, often cruel and outlandish, tend to spread more easily than others because they serve as a stark contrast to modern civilization. It's easy for us to view the past as barbaric and use such myths to make ourselves feel more advanced. While Jus Primae Noctis serves as a powerful plot device in Braveheart, showing how the English abused the Scots, the truth is, it never really existed. In reality, the Scots were never subject to such a rule, and the entire medieval world was free from it. Still, Braveheart may have taken liberties with history, but it remains a memorable and inspirational film with its famous speeches and, of course, Mel Gibson's iconic blue face. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Your suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below.